It looks wrong, like a trick of perspective. A small airplane rattles down the runway, but its wings are turned upright, pointing to the sky, as if someone took the idea of flight and rotated it 90 degrees. The thing itself barely looks finished. It stands as a spindly metal skeleton with a glass bubble at the front. At the tail, small vanes flicker with movement, fighting to keep the ungainly shape steady, while the big propellers howl overhead. Dust spirals off the concrete as the craft hesitates, shivering against gravity. Then, impossibly, it begins to lift, almost straight up. Inch by inch, it rises on a column of noise, as if testing whether the air will allow such defiance. The wings, absurdly vertical, hold. It's 1957, and someone has just made an airplane rise like a helicopter. When war comes, the first targets are the runways. Without them, jets can't launch, bombers can't return, and the skies go silent. Every commander knows air power is only as strong as the concrete beneath it. In 1940, the Luftwaffe crippled RAF forces in France by blasting airfields. In the Pacific, US Seabees carved coral runways under fire. By the 1950s, with nuclear war looming, one bomb could ground an entire air force. That fear drove a new obsession: flight that didn't need a runway. Centuries earlier, Leonardo da Vinci had sketched a spiral flying machine that never left the ground, but the dream refused to fade. By 1907, French inventors coaxed primitive helicopters into brief, trembling hovers. They were fragile and barely controllable, but they proved that flight didn't have to begin with a run. Still, helicopters had limits. They could rise straight up, but they were slow, unstable, and voraciously burned fuel. Their rotors gave them lift, but robbed them of range and speed. For the engineers of the jet age, that wasn't enough. They wanted an aircraft that could lift like a helicopter, yet fly like a plane, one that could tilt its wings or rotors, rise straight up, then race away at jet speed. The idea, soon known as VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing, began brewing in laboratories and hangars around the world. Through the 1920s and 30s, inventors had experimented with tilt-rotor aircraft. Henry Berliner tested a fixed-wing plane with horizontal rotors. In wartime Germany, Heinrich Fokker went further with the FA-269, a single-engine aircraft meant to rise like a helicopter and fly like a fighter. It was daring and ingenious, but it never flew. Allied bombs destroyed the prototypes before testing began. The jet age brought the idea back to life. With lighter materials, more powerful engines, and the pressures of the Cold War driving innovation, engineers took another shot at vertical flight. In 1956, that challenge had exploded into a frenzy of experiments. The McDonnell XV-1, with its tip-jet rotor, and the Bell XV-3, which tilted its propellers for lift, had proven that an aircraft could hover like a helicopter, yet fly faster than any rotorcraft before. The next question was how to make it practical. The U.S. Army and the Office of Naval Research placed a small, risky $850,000 bet on a concept that might rewrite aviation. The contract went to Vertol Aircraft, a new company born from Piasecki Helicopter after its founder's departure in 1955. In Mutant, Pennsylvania, Vertol's engineers began sketching something entirely new. They called it the Model 76, though the Army labeled it the VZ-2. At just 3,000 pounds, it appeared unfinished, a lightweight framework built mostly from off-the-shelf components. Its narrow fuselage was borrowed from a Bell 47 helicopter. Behind the cockpit sat a single Lycoming T-53 turbine, its exhaust routed through a split metal duct to protect the tail. The idea was simple. Instead of tilting the engines, tilt the entire wing. Power from the central turbine turned twin propellers at the wingtips through a web of shafts and gears. For takeoff, the wing rotated 90 degrees, lifting the VZ-2 straight up. Once airborne, it tilted forward and eased into level flight like a small airplane, a shift that demanded the aircraft think like a helicopter one moment and a plane the next, all under a single pilot's control. The Army wanted results, yet enthusiasm from above was thin. The Air Force, which oversaw Army aviation procurement, had little interest in vertical flight. If this idea were going to take off, Vertol would have to make it fly on its own. On April 1st, 1957, a strange little prototype rolled out of its hangar for the first time. Months of tethered tests led to a moment that still looks impossible on film. Heavy cables had held the fragile machine in place as its twin propellers tore at the air, dust swirling in violent spirals. Then at last the day came when the cables came off. In the grainy footage, the VZ-2 trembles on its wheels, wings tilted upright like sails. The rotors blur into motion, and the aircraft slowly begins to rise, almost straight up. It wobbles, steadies, and hangs there, held in the churn of its own prop wash. As the pilot moves the controls, the wing begins to tilt forward. The motion is slow and careful, every adjustment deliberate. One moment, the aircraft behaves like a helicopter, the next like an airplane, as something entirely new takes shape between them. The handoff of control is invisible to the eye, but remarkable in concept. Tail rotors yield to ailerons and rudder as the VZ-2 trades hover for flight. Watching it even now feels like witnessing the first moment of a new kind of motion. On August 13, 1957, test pilot Leonard Levasseur flew the aircraft for the first time. Its wings were almost vertical as the propellers bit into the air, lifting the small plane off the ground. It wobbled for a second, then steadied. Newsreel footage captured one of these early tests, described by the press as, quote, "The pilot lifted this aircraft as a helicopter, tilted the wings for a short horizontal flight, then converted back to hover and vertical landing." By January 7, 1958, Levasseur managed the first horizontal flight. On July 15th of that year, he achieved the first full transition from hover to forward flight and back again, the first time any aircraft had ever done so. After the first flights in Morton, the VZ-2 was transferred to Vertol's Philadelphia plant and later to Edwards Air Force Base. Between 1957 and 1965, it completed more than 450 flights, a remarkable record for a machine still considered experimental. Progress came at the edge of control. The aircraft experienced severe buffeting during transitions, especially during partial power descents, when airflow over the wing broke down, leading to loss of roll stability. Test pilots learned to feel the stall through the first shudders of turbulence, leveling out or adding power before it worsened. In 1961, Vertol replaced the original wing with a new design featuring full-span flaps, a drooped leading edge, and split ailerons for better roll authority. The changes eased much of the instability that had plagued earlier tests. NASA later assumed control of the program after the Army determined its pilots weren't trained for the complex demands of VTOL transitions. Over its career, the VZ-2 logged 454.5 hours, including 73 in free flight. It completed more than 200 partial transitions and 34 full conversions, clear proof that the concept worked, even if it was challenging to master. By 1965, McNamara's consolidation of overlapping aircraft projects brought most experimental VTOL efforts to an end, including the VZ-2. The aircraft was retired and placed in the Smithsonian's rare bird alcove. Though the VZ-2 never became a combat machine, it fulfilled its mission. Engineers who studied the VZ-2 a decade later carried its lessons into the next generation of vertical flight. The early tilt wing had proven that transition was possible, but also that it came with turbulence, buffeting, and razor-thin margins of control. Bell took up the challenge with the XV-15, a sleeker and more refined machine. Instead of tilting the entire wing, its engineers mounted the engines and rotors in swiveling nacelles, solving many of the stability problems that had plagued earlier designs. This lifted off in 1977, rising smoothly as if standing on the shoulders of every awkward prototype before it. From that program came the V-22 Osprey, the world's first operational tilt rotor. Born from decades of trial and failure, it combined the range and speed of an airplane with the vertical lift of a helicopter. The Osprey could carry troops across oceans, fold its rotors for carrier storage, and transition midair with the precision the VZ-2 could only dream of. That lineage continues with the V-280 Valor, Bell's next-gen tilt rotor, built for the U.S. Army's future long-range assault aircraft program. It promises greater speed, longer range, and advanced digital flight controls. The airframe is sleeker, the system smarter, but the idea remains the same. Rise like a helicopter, fly like a plane. Unlike its ancestors, the The Valor's wings stay fixed while only the rotors tilt, simplifying the mechanism that once burdened the Osprey. The result is a lighter, faster design, capable of nearly 280 knots and with a range far beyond that of any helicopter in service. Still, the Valor stirs debate. When the Army selected it over Sikorsky and Boeing's Defiant 10 in 2022, critics warned against favoring an unproven aircraft over the reliability of a coaxial helicopter. Skeptics see risk in its complexity. Supporters see the future. But each time the Valor climbs, there's something familiar in its motion. The careful lift, the trembling balance, that instant when gravity yields. It's the same fragile defiance first witnessed in 1957, when the BZ-2 lifted from Morton's runway and proved that the shape of flight could change.